So these are the Dunu SA6, Dunu's first attempt at a full BA IEM, which is quite interesting because Dunu is very well known for just using dynamic drivers and using hybrid drivers. They've never made a full BA IEM in the past, and this is the first attempt, and I must say it's a pretty damn good one. Now, disclaimer before we start the review, this Dunu SA6 was provided by a subscriber, so thank you, Bang Ikip, for this unit. And we're not affiliated to any store or any brand whatsoever, so this review will be just completely of my own opinion. Okay, now we just gloss over like the build quality for a little while because I didn't get the production package, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll just glance that over real quick. So the Dunu SA6s, right? So they're pretty unique in the sense that they have this pseudo custom IEM shell, 6 drivers per side, and they have this little switch on the back, right? So this switch just changes the sound a little bit. It's called some atmospheric mode or something like that. I don't remember what it's called. It bumps up the bass a little bit. It bumps up the upper mids slightly, very slightly, right? And yeah, that's all it does. It adds a bit of perception, like a little extra width perception, but that's about what I perceive. Right. The shell itself is quite nice. It's made out of resin, I believe, and the faceplate is integrated quite well. The size also isn't too big. It's a bit smaller than something like the Blessing 2s. Yeah, if you can see, the Blessing 2s are gigantic. Yeah, they're freaking giants. Look at, see, the Dunu SA6s are just slightly smaller, right? But the Dunu SA6 does have a bit of a problem in the nozzle. I was not able to get ear tips to fit or just stay on properly. Anything else aside from the SA6, even the stock Dunu ear tips that come with it, they just kept falling off for some reason. So I had to resort to using the SA6. I did do my listening impressions on these stock ear tips, like half and half with the SA6, and I was not able to perceive much of a difference in terms of sound, aside from the SA6 just providing better isolation in general and being more comfortable, of course. So yeah. Aside from that, the other notable thing about the Dunu SA6s is that they have a very nice cable. This is the Dunu DUW03, which you can purchase separately. They're like $200 or something, which is quite ridiculous to be honest. But they do feel very high quality. They're quite supple. They're a bit microphonic. The chin slider works. It's not the best design. I don't think this really works well with this. I think a tube would have been better. It's quite heavy as well, so if you move around a lot, it actually drags the IEM a bit down, so that's a bit of a bummer. But the best part of this cable is the end of the connection, the jack, right? So you get multiple modules with this jack. You can change these. So this is the 3.5mm SE jack. You can change this with the 4.4 or even the 2.5, which you also get with this IEM, but I don't have it with me. I only got the 4.4 and 3.5, but it's a pretty damn interesting system. It also feels really solid, and it's angled as well, albeit being quite long. But I think this is better than just having a straight jack. I really like the system. Moondrop also has a equivalently has their like cheaper counterpart, which is the Moondrop 8 and OCC interchangeable cable, which goes for like $60 or something, $50-$60 if I recall correctly. But it doesn't feel anywhere near as nice as this does. This feels really, really nice. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention is that the Dunu SA6s does have a bit of a fend, like a small fend here. Focus, please, camera, focus. It has a small fend here, so the isolation isn't the best, but it's still very good. So yeah, now that's covered. We'll just start with sound quality. This sound of the Dunu SA6s is very nice. It's a little warm. It's more like neutral with like a bit of a bass emphasis, slight bass emphasis. It's actually quite shy. There's not lots of it. And speaking of bass emphasis, that's what we're going to be talking about first. So the bass of the Dunu SA6s, it's very slightly emphasized. It has more sub bass than it does mid bass. And albeit it being a full BA IEM, right, the bass on these, the sub bass on these, it doesn't really extend well, but It has really nice slam. It's quite close to what a dynamic driver would be able to deliver, and I'm glad about that. The mid bass punch is also quite nice. Kicks are also quite good. As a full BA IEM, I'm quite glad that they're able to replicate or get quite close to the qualities of a dynamic driver. And aside from that, the overall speed is on the medium to faster side. It also has very good control overall, and it also doesn't really become mush even if you listen to stuff like Dragon Force, which is quite surprising. It still gets it gets a bit blurry and muddy in like the faster parts of the song, but even then, most of the time, it's still able to keep up with very fast songs. Aside from that, the texture of the bass of the Dunu SA6s is also very good, which is not what I would expect from a full BA IEM. Because generally, full BA IEMs just have this like very limp, plasticky sort of bass, which isn't that great. But the Dunu SA6s definitely deliver. I would have loved a bit of better extension, but this is good enough, I would say. Aside from that, because of the great control that it has, it also doesn't bleed into the mid-range at all, from what I'm able to hear, so that's good. And speaking of the mid-range of the Dunu SA6s is slightly, it's like neutral, but slightly emphasizing the upper mid regions for female vocals and violins, for example. And for male vocals, I do feel sometimes I want that a little bit more body in the lower mids, but as it is for everything else, I'm completely fine with it. Only for like heavier male vocals and just maybe some guitars sometimes feel just a bit too thin on these, but that even then, that's very nitpicky, I would say. If you like a clean mid-range with a great texture and just very smooth presentation of the mid-range and don't mind a very slight emphasis in the upper mids, I would say the Dunu SA6s will do great for you. Now, when we talk about the treble is probably where I have the biggest problems with the Dunu SA6s, because the Dunus here have they're a bit emphasized, not by much at all, but there's a bit of a dip at like 5.5k, which sounds a bit odd to me, and the treble has a bit of a very slight BA timbre in there. It's very slight, but it can still be a bit off-putting when you listen to very compressed music, for example, and stuff. But even then, on very well mastered songs, you will not notice this as much. But on more compressed songs or more modern songs, which have normally terrible mastering, then maybe you'll be able to notice this more. I'm pointing this out simply because I was able to perceive it on a couple of occasions. But even then, that's again being very nitpicky. Aside from that, I'm very happy with the treble of the Dunu SA6s. Extension, albeit it not being that great, it starts rolling off like 13 something k, 12, 13k. Most of my songs don't reach the very high octave, so I don't really mind it. But if you have songs that go way beyond that, then maybe it might be a problem for you. Cymbal presentation, etc. feels a bit more very slightly more exaggerated than normal, but even I am able to still cope with it. Although I'm quite sensitive to this region usually, I'm very sensitive to cymbals and just sibilants in general. But the Dunu SA6s, about it being slightly exaggerated, still feels pretty safe to me. So yeah. Now, when we talk about soundstage and imaging of the Dunu SA6s, if this were my head, I was able to perceive like this much of soundstage, like it's slightly just inwards from my head. In terms of depth, it was also like 3/4 in terms of the the length of my head, so that's quite good. And one other thing that I wanted to point out is that normally I don't really perceive height that greatly when we talk about IEMs and such. That's why I don't normally point it out. But with the SA6s, I was able to perceive quite a good bit of height actually. I was able to perceive like what felt like 10 centimeters of height from my ears. Normally I would only be able to perceive like maybe 5 centimeters or something. It feels like just this much, like it feels just like the size of my ear or something. But on the Dunu SA6s, I was able to feel it go almost to like the level of my neck. So that's about like 10 centimeters or so. So yeah, that's pretty damn good, I would say. I don't normally feel that, so yeah. Now, in terms of comparison, because it's $500, I would like to compare it first of all to just the Moondrop S8s, because I think that's probably one of your closest competitors, because they're full BA and all that. The Moondrop S8s does have more BAs. The Moondrop S8, as its name implies, has 8 BA drivers per side. And I would say the Moondrop S8s, when we compare the base, right, I think the S8s have slightly better texture and slightly better extension. It isn't as well controlled as the SA6s. The SA6s has way snappier bass. The Moondrop S8 has better punch and just better slam in the bass, and has just better texture in general. I would say that if you're looking for faster bass, you would want to go with the SA6s. If you want more textured and don't mind a bit slightly slower bass, you probably want to go with the Moondrop S8s. In terms of mid-range, I think the Moondrop S8s actually have thicker lower mids compared to the Dunu SA6s. So male vocals sound a bit more bodied on the Moondrop S8s compared to the SA6s, but the female vocals on the S8s can be quite a bit more forward compared to the Dunu SA6s. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you're very sensitive to upper mid region, you might want to shy away from the S8s, and the SA6s would have been a better choice. When we talk about treble, I think the S8s win overall. Aside from detail, I was able to perceive slightly more detail on the SA6s compared to the S8s. The S8s though have way better, it has way less BA timbre. I was actually barely, if at all, able to hear any BA timbre on the Moondrop S8's treble. Extension on the S8s also felt better compared to the Dunu SA6s. But the S8 is also overall softer in the treble region, so you might want to keep that in mind, because if you want a bit slight more aggressiveness in the treble, you might want to just take the SA6s. In terms of soundstage and depth, I think they're on the same playing field, but in depth. But for the height, I think the SA6s just have better height overall. I very rarely perceive this much height on an IEM. This might just be a me thing because of the insertion or whatever. But yeah, as usual, take it with a huge grain of salt in terms of when I talk about soundstage. Now, another comparison I'm gonna do is against the the Blessing 2s, because that's something that was frequently asked to me, whether or not from the Blessing 2 it's a worthy upgrade to go to the SA6. As long as you don't mind slightly less texture in the bass for more control, I would say yes, it's a worthy upgrade. The Blessing 2's bass just feels better because of the dynamic driver. It has better texture, but it has less control compared to the SA6s. The Blessing 2's mid-range is on similar weight compared to the SA6s, but the upper mids can be quite a bit more aggressive on the Blessing 2s. The treble region, I think the SA6s are on equal footing, except the Blessing 2s can feel a bit slightly more grainier compared to the SA6s. I think the SA6s actually feel a bit smoother at times. So yeah. All in all, I would say that for the price, the SA6s is a very easy to like, very easy to listen to IEM, and I would probably recommend this for like $500. Yeah. Now, I think that's about it for this review. Like if you liked it, comment what you think, and see you guys next time.